She was just a tired librarian on a flight home. He was a billionaire hiding from the world. But when Lena Hartley accidentally fell asleep on Ethan Cole's shoulder, it sparked a chain of events that would challenge power, loyalty, and love itself. Bribes, betrayal, media storms, everything stood in their way. Yet somehow, what began as a quiet moment in seat 12A turned into a love worth fighting for. Where are you watching from today? Drop your city below, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful, unforgettable stories like this one. You won't want to miss what's next. Lena Hartley tugged her scarf tighter around her neck as she trudged through the terminal at Denver International Airport. Her boots clicked softly on the tile, echoing between weary travelers and rolling suitcases. It had been a long week. 3 days at a national children's literacy conference where she'd presented her modest library's outreach program, and 2 more days catching up with old friends in Boulder. Now, with storm clouds swirling outside and yet another delay behind her, all Lena wanted was to get home to Portland, kick off her shoes, and sink into the quiet comfort of her worn-out couch with a mug of peppermint tea. She glanced at the boarding gate. Final call for Flight 1748 to Portland. Zone 2. Her heart gave a little skip, not because she was late, she had plenty of time, but because she hadn't slept more than 4 hours a night since Monday. She stepped into line, clutching her tote bag with one hand and her book with the other, a dog-eared copy of the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society she'd promised herself she'd finally finish on this flight. The line inched forward. Her legs ached. Her head throbbed with the dull echo of conference chatter and fluorescent lights. When she finally reached her seat, 12A, window, she exhaled in relief. Lena stowed her bag, sat down, and leaned her forehead briefly against the cool window. Please, let the middle seat stay empty, she thought. Just this once. No such luck. Excuse me, came a voice, low and velvety, with just a hint of East Coast polish. Lena turned and found herself looking up at a man in a navy wool coat and slate-gray scarf, with salt and pepper hair that looked entirely too good for someone presumably just off a business trip. He gave a polite smile and gestured to the seat beside her. Oh, sorry, she murmured, shifting to let him pass. He settled in beside her with practiced ease, removing only a slim leather notebook from his messenger bag. His cologne was subtle, clean, woodsy, and somehow calming. Lena tried to focus on her book, but the letters blurred. As the plane taxied, she barely registered the safety demonstration. Her eyes grew heavier with every jolt and rattle of the wheels. The captain announced a 2-hour flight. That was the last thing she remembered. When she stirred sometime later, her cheek was warm against something firmer than a pillow and moving slightly with each breath. Mortified, Lena jerked upright, heart pounding. She'd fallen asleep on a stranger. On this man. I'm so sorry, she stammered, blinking groggily. Her fingers flew to her hair, to her seatbelt, to anywhere but his face. It's all right, the man said, turning toward her with a kind smile that reached his hazel eyes. Honestly, it was the most peaceful hour I've had in years. Lena blinked. She hadn't expected that. She smiled awkwardly, then looked out the window to see the glitter of Portland's lights beneath them. As the plane touched down and passengers began unbuckling, the man remained still beside her. No fluster, no sarcasm, just calm. He gathered his notebook, stood, and waited as she did the same. Have a safe trip home, he said. You too, Lena replied. It wasn't until she was back in her apartment, curled up on the couch with her book, that she found it. Tucked between pages 97 and 98 was a folded napkin from the airline, scrawled in elegant handwriting, "Thank you for the quiet hour. If you'd ever like to finish that book, over coffee maybe, I'd be honored. E." Her heart skipped. She read it twice, 3 times. And for the first time in a long while, Lena Hartley found herself smiling not because of a story someone else had written, but because of one that might just be starting. Lena stared at the napkin for a long time. She ran her thumb along the folded edge, tracing the careful script like it might vanish if she blinked too hard. Who was E? And why did his handwriting look like something off a wedding invitation? She flipped through the book again. Nothing else. Just the napkin, crisp and personal, in a way that made her chest tighten. It had been years since anyone wrote her anything that wasn't a receipt or a late notice. And this was unexpected. That night, She dreamed about turbulence, about falling asleep midair and waking in a different life. One where men with soft hazel eyes and warm shoulders left notes like a plot twist. When she woke, the dream clung to her like mist. She set the napkin on her kitchen counter beside her coffee mug, unsure if it was real. By lunchtime, it still sat there, and she couldn't stop glancing at it like it might start talking. Eventually, curiosity overtook hesitation. She typed Cole and Portland Tech Conference into her laptop. The results stunned her. Ethan Cole, CEO and founder of Veritas Tech, pioneer in educational blockchain transparency. Forbes 30 Under 30 alumnus, now in his 40s and even more influential. Known for avoiding the spotlight, rarely giving interviews. Rumored net worth in the billions. Lena stared at the screen. That couldn't be right. The man on the plane, her unexpected human pillow, hadn't acted like a mogul. No suits, no arrogance, no entourage. Just a notebook and a quiet presence. She almost laughed aloud. It must be a coincidence, or a joke. But the more she looked at the images, the thoughtful gaze, the slight crease between his brows, the smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, the more she realized it was him. She hesitated only a moment longer before sending a message to the email address listed on his company bio. Hi. This is Lena, seat 12A, window. I found your note. If your coffee offer still stands, I know a great little spot that serves scones the size of small planets. She didn't expect a reply right away. Maybe not at all, but 3 hours later, her phone vibrated. Absolutely. I love giant scones. Thursday at 4. The Booksmith Cafe, if I've guessed your taste right. He had. It was Lena's favorite local cafe, cozy, lined with old hardcovers and indie poetry zines no one ever bought. She replied with a simple forward. See you then, and tried not to overthink the next 48 hours. Thursday came too quickly. She changed outfits 3 times, finally settling on a green knit sweater that made her eyes look brighter. As she approached the cafe, she spotted him through the window, already seated with a cup of tea and somehow her book in hand. He stood when she entered. Lena, he said, like it was the only word he'd been waiting to say all day. Ethan, she replied, heart thumping. They sat. The scones lived up to the hype. The conversation came easily, looping from their shared love of libraries to her conference presentation and his work in data ethics. He wasn't what she expected. He asked questions, listened closely. When she joked about a toddler at the library demanding the very hungry caterpillar be read 10 times in one sitting, he laughed, not politely, but genuinely. You know, he said halfway through his drink, when you fell asleep on my shoulder, I didn't want to move. It was the first time in months I wasn't thinking about mergers or lawsuits or performance metrics. Just stillness, peace. Lena looked down at her cup. I'm not usually that forward, she said. Accidental napping aside. I'm glad you were. They talked until the cafe dimmed its lights for closing. As they walked out together, Ethan glanced at her and said, Would you do this again? Coffee. Conversation. Maybe less accidental sleeping this time. Lena smiled. I think that can be arranged. For the next few weeks, coffee turned into walks. Walks turned into dinners, and dinners into quiet nights filled with soft laughter and unspoken comfort. Lena and Ethan settled into a rhythm that felt impossibly natural, like they'd simply stepped into each other's lives and found they already knew the steps. He met her at the library one afternoon, surprising her with a boxed lunch and a bouquet of wildflowers. She showed him the children's section, introduced him to her favorite nook where the morning light hit just right, and even let him sit in on story time. Ethan watched her read to a group of squirming 5-year-olds, voices full of wonder, and thought she looked more radiant than anyone he'd ever seen in a tailored gown. But peace never lingered long in Ethan Cole's world. One morning, Lena arrived at the library to find her coworker Liz clutching a glossy magazine. Lena, she said, holding it up. Is this you? On the cover, slightly grainy but unmistakable, was a photo of Lena and Ethan leaving the cafe. His arm was gently around her waist. The headline screamed, Veritas Tech Founder's Mystery Woman, Who is she? Lena's stomach dropped. She scanned the article. It didn't name her but speculated wildly, calling her everything from a secret investor to a charity case turned Cinderella. She set the magazine down slowly, trying to keep her face neutral, though her hands were trembling. By lunchtime, the whispers had spread. Patrons eyed her curiously. Someone asked for her autograph as a joke. The sanctuary that had always grounded her now felt exposed. That night, her phone rang. "I'm so sorry," Ethan said the moment she picked up. "I should have prepared you. They leave me alone most of the time, but a new relationship?" His voice was tight with guilt. "It's not your fault," Lena said, though her throat ached, "but it's strange being seen like this. Like I'm a headline instead of a person." "I'll talk to my PR team," he said. "We'll get ahead of it, protect you however we can." Over the following days, the media attention only grew. More photos, more speculation. Reporters appeared outside the library, snapping pictures as Lena walked to her car. Her supervisor pulled her aside with forced sympathy. "Maybe take a few days off," she suggested, "until the buzz dies down." Ethan did everything he could to shield her. Private cars, security if she wanted, but Lena refused to be hidden away. "I didn't fall in love with you to disappear from my own life," she told him one evening. He looked at her, stricken. "Did you say?" She blinked. Had she? There was a knock on the door before she could respond. Ethan went to answer it. A courier handed him a plain envelope. He read it, stiffened, then handed it to Lena. Inside was a typed memo from Veritas Tech's board. It included a proposal authored by Harper Wynn, Ethan's head of strategy, suggesting a partnership with a data mining firm notorious for selling student information. The deal promised exponential profits, but went against everything Ethan had built his company to stand for. "She's been pushing this quietly for weeks," Ethan said, "and now she's framing me as distracted, implying you're the reason I'm not focused." Lena felt her chest tighten. "Me?" He nodded. "She's using the media attention, painting it like I've changed, softened, slipped." "Well," Lena said softly, "you have changed, but not like that." That night, as they lay in silence, Lena stared at the ceiling, haunted by a thought she couldn't shake. "Maybe I should step back," she whispered. "Give you space to fight this without me complicating things." Ethan turned toward her, his voice firm. "No, you don't get to disappear because they can't see you clearly. I do. I see you, and I need you right here." She didn't reply, but she reached for his hand under the blanket and held on tighter than she ever had before. Lena knew something was wrong the moment she opened her apartment door. The man standing in the hallway wasn't Ethan. He was older, dressed in a sleek tailored suit that whispered money and menace, with silver hair and a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Miss Hartley," he said smoothly, extending a hand she didn't take. "Harper Wynn, I believe we should talk." Lena hesitated, her instinct screaming no, but curiosity edged her backward to let him in. She kept the door wide open. Harper stepped inside like he owned the air around him, glancing around her small living room with a flicker of disdain barely hidden beneath civility. "Charming," he commented, "very humble." "Say what you came to say," Lena replied, crossing her arms. He didn't sit. Instead, he reached into his coat and pulled out a folded check. He laid it gently on the coffee table like it was a weapon she hadn't realized could hurt. $1.5 million, he said. "Tax-free, yours, if you walk away from Ethan, no explanations, no goodbyes, just disappear." Lena stared at the check, her stomach twisting. "You're kidding." "I'm not," Harper said. "I've seen women like you before. You fall into a life you didn't earn and don't understand, and suddenly everything he's built is at risk because of a fairy tale." Her voice was low but sharp. "You think I care about his money?" "I think," Harper said, narrowing his eyes, "you're a distraction at best and a liability at worst. Ethan's judgment has been compromised. He's missed meetings, rejected a highly profitable data partnership. He's too emotionally invested in you to see the bigger picture." Lena stepped forward, fire rising. "You mean the deal that sells out millions of students' privacy? The one that violates everything Veritas Tech was built to protect?" Harper's jaw tightened. "Business evolves, so must we. Sentiment has no place in leadership." Lena picked up the check. She held it between two fingers, then slowly, deliberately, tore it in half. Then in quarters, she dropped the pieces on the floor. "Get out," she said. He blinked. "Think about what you're giving up." "I'm not giving up anything," she cut in. "I'm protecting someone I care about from people like you. Now leave." Harper studied her for a beat longer, then gave a dry smile. "Interesting. Maybe I underestimated you." He turned and left without another word, the door clicking shut behind him like the final sentence of a bad chapter. Lena stood there for a long moment, heart pounding, then slowly sat on the couch, staring at the shredded check on the rug. Should she tell Ethan? Would it make things worse? Would it seem like she was trying to come between him and the company he'd built from nothing? Before she could decide, her phone rang. Lena. Ethan's voice came through, rough but relieved. The board meeting just ended. We shut Harper's proposal down completely. The data partnership's dead. That's good news, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. There's more, he said. I've asked for a full audit of our business operations. The board agreed. Harper's not happy about it, but it's happening. Lena hesitated. This was the moment. She could bury what had just happened, or be honest. Ethan, she said softly, can you come over? There's something I need to tell you too. He paused. Of course, I'll be there in 15. She hung up and looked around her apartment at the torn check still scattered on the floor. Whatever came next, she knew it would change everything. Not just for her and Ethan, but for the company, for their future. When the doorbell rang and she saw Ethan's familiar silhouette, she didn't hesitate. She opened the door wide. Come in, she said. We need to talk. Ethan stepped into the apartment, still in the same clothes he'd worn to the emergency board meeting, his tie loose, his collar slightly wrinkled, and his eyes filled with quiet tension. But when he saw Lena's face, his expression softened instantly. In his hand was a small bouquet of wildflowers, the same kind he'd once left at the library. He held them out wordlessly. Lena took them, her fingers brushing his. Thank you, she whispered. Then she gestured to the couch. Please, sit. I have to tell you something before anything else. Ethan sat, leaning forward, his forearms resting on his knees. Lena lowered herself beside him, her palms slightly damp. She reached for the torn pieces of the check still on the table and held them out to him. Harper was here, she said. An hour before you called. Ethan's face froze. He offered me $1.5 million, she continued, to walk away from you. No explanation. Just disappear. Her voice trembled for a second, then steadied. I tore it up, told him to leave. Ethan stared at the paper in her hands, then slowly took it, the fragments crinkling as he closed his fist. For a long moment, he didn't say anything. His jaw tightened. Then, with a low voice that barely concealed the fury beneath, he said, He came into your home, tried to buy you off like you're just another variable to be managed. I didn't want to keep it from you, Lena said quickly. But I didn't know if telling you would make things worse, between you and him, between you and the board. He stood abruptly, running a hand through his hair, pacing. There's no between me and Harper anymore. What he did today, at the board and here, it's unforgivable. He's gone, Lena. I don't care how long we've worked together or what he's helped build. This crosses every line. She followed him with her eyes, her voice calm despite the ache in her chest. He said I'm distracting you, that I'm changing you. Ethan stopped, then turned to face her. You are changing me, he said softly, but not in the way he means. You're reminding me of who I wanted to be when I started all this. Before the headlines, before the investors. You're the only person in years who sees me without all the layers. And I'm not giving that up. He crossed the room in 2 strides and knelt in front of her, taking her hands in his. I love you, Lena. I know we haven't said it, not really, but I do, with every part of me. Tears pricked her eyes as she whispered, I love you too. Ethan exhaled, like those words were the only thing holding him upright. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Lena's breath caught. I had a whole plan, he said with a sheepish smile. Dinner at the Italian place, a walk by the river, something grand but meaningful. But maybe this, here now, is more real. Just us, no cameras, no noise. He opened the box to reveal a ring, simple, elegant, with a single round diamond framed in rose gold. When you fell asleep on my shoulder, it was the first time I felt peace in years. Since then, you've brought light into every part of my life. So, Lena Hartley, will you marry me? Lena looked at the man in front of her, the fragments of Harper's check still on the table, the scent of wildflowers in the air, and the love in Ethan's eyes. She smiled through the tears. Yes, she said, her voice full of certainty. Yes, I will. He slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his arms. They stayed like that, wrapped in each other, knowing this wasn't the end of the storm, but it was the beginning of something stronger. Something theirs. And outside, as the wind pressed softly against the window, the world quietly shifted, making space for a new story to begin. Sometimes, life changes in the most unexpected ways, through a missed connection, a spontaneous nap, or a single moment of kindness. Lena and Ethan's story reminds us that love doesn't always come dressed in grand gestures or perfect timing. Often, it finds us in the quiet spaces between chaos and control, when we're vulnerable, when we're simply ourselves. What truly matters isn't wealth, power, or public image, but the courage to choose connection over convenience, integrity over profit, and love over fear. Lena could have taken the money. Ethan could have walked away to protect his company, but they both chose something harder and far more meaningful: to stand beside each other when it would have been easier to let go. The story also speaks to the power of being seen, not for status or reputation, but for who we really are. In a world driven by optics and judgment, finding someone who sees your heart is rare. Keeping them? That's where the real story begins. So here's the lesson. Never underestimate the small, unplanned moments. They might just change your life. And when life challenges your values, stand by them, even if it costs you comfort, because the reward is always greater than the risk. Now we want to hear from you. Where in the world are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments. We love seeing our global community grow. And if this story touched you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next one. See you soon.